After days of deliberation, the jury rendered a verdict in the Proud Boys case, and it started with this note. Coming in, it said, Your Honor, we have reached unanimous verdicts on all of the charges except for the following. Count 1, Goal 1, Count 2 as to Pezzola, Count 7 as to Nordine, Biggs, Rehl, and Tario, and Count 8 as to all defendants. Jury Note 9. And that kicked off the day. We're going to go over to Kyle Cheney, reporting for Politico, who broke down how this unfolded this morning. He says, happening now. Verdicts expected in the Proud Boys trials momentarily, lawyers, defendants pouring into the courtroom. This comes after 6 days of deliberation. And the big question is about seditious conspiracy, which is exactly right. The government has a narrative that they want to continue to proffer forward. They've already convicted several people via plea agreement. They've already convicted other people in the Oath Keepers seditious conspiracy trial. This would be the third batch of convictions that they got through a trial. So they want that charge to stick, and they want it to stick for all of them. The other charges are harder to defend. In fact, many of the other charges, they just gave up. They just said, yeah, you know what? We did do some damage. Yeah, we did interfere. We did some other things here and there, but not sedition. This wasn't a giant conspiracy. Sure, we were trespassing. Nobody even contends that. In fact, if they offered them a plea deal to just a trespass charge or something other than that, I'm very inclined to believe they would have taken it. But they needed this charge to stick, in my opinion, because they're coming after Trump. Kyle says there are other felony charges on the list. Yeah, obstruction, impeding officers, and so on. But everybody's back in the courtroom and Judge Kelly's on the bench. Now they're discussing with the lawyers what to do after accepting the partial verdict. Now, this came in piecemeal. We didn't get all the verdicts delivered at the same time, as there are so many defendants and so many different charges and counts. They would decide on some, turn them into the judge, decide on others. The DOJ is urging Kelly, send the jurors back, keep deliberating. We have Norm Pattis and Carmen Hernandez. They're saying, Your Honor, don't take the partial verdict. The jury has said they're deadlocked on the unresolved counts, and so make them come back with everything. The judge said, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to take the partial verdict. I want to get this over with. And tell the jury it can continue to deliberate on the remaining counts. So they come in momentarily. He says, all right, get your bags, jurors. You're coming back in here. Now, jury walks into the courtroom, and the jury agrees there was a seditious conspiracy. One by one. Proud Boy Ethan Nordine, as to the charge of seditious conspiracy, we the people find Proud Boy Ethan Nordine guilty of seditious conspiracy. Same thing for Biggs. Verdict? Guilty. Zachary Rehl, guilty. And you see here Kyle Cheney, Tario, guilty of seditious conspiracy, the full count. Getting some extra words in there because Enrique Tario is the leader of the Proud Boys. Now you'll notice that we're missing something here. That's interesting. Ethan Nordine, Biggs, Rehl, Tario. About Dominic Pezzola. And you remember Dominic Pezzola. He was the poster boy of this entire thing. He was the person who stole the shield. He was the person who broke the window. He was the most violent person in this whole thing. There he is. He's got the shield right in front of him right there. And he's not a part of this conspiracy? He hasn't been convicted yet? Oh, that's weird. He says all defendants but Pezzola are also guilty of all of the other conspiracies. Jury seems deadlocked on some other counts. And Kyle gives us some updates there. Now, immediately after that partial verdict was rendered, there was a motion filed by Carmen Hernandez. She wasn't playing around. She said, hey, you don't have any authority to take a partial verdict. What's wrong with you, Judge? She sent this in. She said, Your Honor, we object to the taking of the partial verdict, filed May 4th. It says, my client, Mr. Rehl, through undersigned counsel, hereby respectfully objects to the taking of a partial verdict as to the seditious conspiracy charge, while the jury is still deliberating on the other co-conspirators' counts. There is no authority for taking a partial verdict under these circumstances, and as the jury deliberations have now been improperly interrupted, Your Honor, my client moves for a mistrial as to count 1, signed your friend Carmen Hernandez. Sent into the court on that one. You can understand that's going to be declined. So the jury note, as we saw, was also submitted 9:35 in the morning. So this came in pretty quickly. Different counts they had some questions about. So the judge sent them back in and said continue to decide. And they finally came out with some verdicts. So that is the update. Now there was an afternoon second set of verdicts that came out. And for that, we'll go over to Roger Parloff, who will catch us up. He says, Judge Kelly is now back on the bench. We have a jury note. The note says, apparently, among other things, and I tried to dig this one up, but it wasn't posted before showtime, said, apparently, among other things, All jurors firmly believe that further deliberation will not lead to unanimous verdicts on any of the other counts. So Metcalf, for the defense, moves on for mistrials. He says we should have mistrials for Pezzola as to counts 2 and 8. And apparently, with respect to Metcalf's motion, we do not oppose. Sounds like further deliberations will not be useful. And so the judge says, yeah, I'm inclined to declare them hung on those counts. I will declare a mistrial, but they have a verdict as to count 1, seditious conspiracy, as it relates to Pezzola, but no further verdicts on the other counts. So they're going to declare mistrials on those. The defense wants to speak with the jurors after this is excused. Apparently there's local rules that say, got to ask the judge for that. So the judge says, well, I'll let you know after the verdict. Biggs's lawyer also wants to speak to the jurors. The jury comes in. Now, the judge is having the jury led back out again. They're asking for a short sidebar, and the jury comes back. Juror 14 stands up, hands up the additional verdict. Judge Kelly says, and I'm sure this was really hard for him to read, as to count 1, seditious conspiracy, the jury finds defendant Dominic Pezzola not guilty. He's probably like, not guilty? What? So Judge Kelly is now polling the jury on that verdict. Do you agree with the partial verdict that was announced? Yes. Do you? Yes. Do you? Yes. Do you? Yes. Okay. Well, I'm going to declare mistrials on all of the other charges. And so, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we are going to relieve you of any further obligation to deliberate. I want to express my thanks for your service in this case. You've been extremely diligent and patient. He praises them for their conscientious service and public service and then dismisses them. So we've got verdicts now. They're all convicted of various charges. They're all going to be sentenced. None of them go free today. So the judge says we better settle some post-trial motions and other requests for mistrials and appeals and all the things. Says, how much time do you guys need for your post-trial motions? They say, I don't know, about a week. All right. Well, the probation department's pre-sentence report is going to be expected by 9/13. And this means that in broad strokes, when a judge does sentencing, the judge hears multiple different parties. The government's going to come out and they're going to say, these were insurrectionists who tried to steal the country. Give them 1,000,000 years, judge. The defense is going to come out and say, no, this was all set up by the FBI. This trial was a sham. Our clients are innocent. They never did any of this stuff. Give them probation, right? They're going to ask for both of these things. The judge is going to say, how about you, this neutral party over at the probation department? Why don't you give us your report? Why don't you interview these defendants, ask them a bunch of questions, see what their likelihood to reoffend is and all the things, put it in a report so the judge can get an objective report. Then the defense will submit their sentencing memo. The government will submit their sentencing memo. The judge will get an independent opinion by this from the probation department, and then he'll make his decision. So that report is going to be expected by September. They're going to have a pre-sentencing hearing sometime late July. They're planning out logistics, and we're still waiting for the official verdict forms to come out from the court so that we can see them. And as I said, I checked before the show and I didn't see them published yet. So what does this all mean? Let's break it down and try to understand what happened here. We've got the 5 different co-defendants who were here charged with crimes. You see them listed up top: Nordine, Biggs, Rehl, Tario, and Pezzola. Dominic Pezzola was the only person who testified. And when we were covering that, we said, holy moly, this was a big effort. This was almost like throwing himself on the grenade. He went out, almost sacrificed himself for his other co-defendants. He said, I am here accepting responsibility for what I did. Don't blame these guys. And we were scratching our heads going, this is crazy. He might be exonerating the others while burying himself because he was explaining in his cross-examination that he thought this was a sham. This was a scam. They had no evidence in this case. And he was being very aggressive with the prosecutor. And you know, the judge is not going to like that. And the prosecutor is not going to like that. And we're even thinking the jury might not like that. Maybe they'll convict him just on that basis. But they didn't convict him of this one charge, this seditious conspiracy charge. This says there was no verdict yet, but we know now there was a verdict. It's not guilty. This should be a green square right here, not guilty. And so I'm sure they updated the chart. But everybody else got convicted of this thing. And so the big question is why? Why did Pezzola not get convicted of seditious conspiracy? And this is a loss for the government. They want everybody who's even remotely connected to be guilty of seditious conspiracy. If they could get every one of us, I'm sure that they would do it if they could, but they can't. And this is a hint that the jury was not giving the same broad reading that the government was giving that would included any type of connection, which Pezzola arguably had. They just said it wasn't strong enough for some reason. maybe that's one explanation for it. We'll explore some others. But as to count 2, conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, you see all of the other Proud Boys got convicted on all of them. There were some hung jury counts on throwing water bottles. And let me see if there's a more recent chart here. Yes, this even looks... Here's the final version. Here is the updated version. Yes. So not applicable. You see at the bottom, count 10. Here we go. So this one looks updated now. Pezzola, you see, is the not guilty. There was no verdict. So we're declaring mistrials on all of these blue diamonds. And then we got all of the assaulting chart. These are pretty obvious down here. Nordine, Biggs, Rehl, and Tario. They weren't really involved in the taking of the riot shield. But do you see how the government charged this? They wanted to say that they were involved in the conspiracy. They're all guilty of all the crimes because they were all in a conspiracy. But the jury didn't see it that way. They said, no, Pezzola is not part of this conspiracy. Only he took the shield. So only he is guilty of taking the shield. The others were not guilty of that, even though they were in a conspiracy together. So we're trying to tease out the logic here. So they're treating Pezzola as an individual, saying they didn't even get him on the water bottle charge. Wow, look at that. So they didn't get any convictions on the water bottle charge. What a stupid charge that was. And I'll move myself over here now. The water bottle charge, no verdicts on that one. Destruction of property, the window, Pezzola got that. So they separated him out from the conspiracy and they charged him individually. And the question is why? What was it that prompted them to do that? And we have some speculation about it. There were some hints that he was just not a part of the leadership chats. Remember, a big part of this testimony was all about the chats. They had telegrams, they had parlors. Did you retweet that? And he was retweeting Parler. Did you like that Parler? Yeah. Did you retweet it? Yeah. So is it the fact that he wasn't as embedded as the others? Maybe. Part of his testimony was that he also just met them in the courtroom. I didn't even know these guys. We just met him after I got arrested. He also wasn't really involved in a lot of the prior rallies. And he was also the person who was there who was testifying. And so sometimes maybe the jury just gave him the benefit of the doubt because he just said something. But what he said was getting up there and said, we didn't know anything about this conspiracy. And so the jury didn't believe that part. They didn't believe that he was credible in saying the other guys were not a part of the conspiracy or that there was no conspiracy. So it's very interesting. It is unfortunate that the government has been able to blame 5 people for a seditious conspiracy when they're, now in this case, 4 people with seditious conspiracy when, in my opinion, there was very, very weak evidence about all of it. And we're going to get to that here in a short second, where some of these missteps were on behalf of the DOJ and the FBI. Defense attorney Norm Pattis commented on this on Twitter. He said, Proud Boys trial ends on a disappointing note for those supporting them. The haters will crow, and they are doing that, and the government will cheat. It was a difficult trial. The appeal, though, is promising. Much love to the Proud Boys and to their supporters. And so I agree with that statement wholeheartedly, and we thank the defense attorneys for putting their hearts and souls into this case. It was a long, long haul, and a lot of defense attorneys wouldn't have the stones to do it. They did. So shout out to Norm and all of the other defense attorneys on this case. Tough day.